The hallways of Mercy General Hospital had a particular kind of cruelty that no medical textbook ever warned about: the silent, suffocating kind that came not from disease or emergency, but from the cold shoulders of people who believed a title made them better than everyone else. Elena Vasquez had felt that cruelty from her very first morning shift. When she walked through those glass doors in her crisp white uniform, her nursing badge still carrying that fresh plastic smell, her hands steady even as her heart hammered with quiet nervousness. She was 38 years old, older than most new nurses on the floor, and the senior staff noticed immediately. Dr. Harlan, the chief attending physician, had looked her up and down with barely concealed amusement and muttered something to his colleague that made them both laugh. Something about late bloomers and bedpan experience. Elena heard every word. She straightened her spine, lifted her chin, and walked to her station without a single word in response. What none of them knew, what she had never volunteered to anyone, was that before those nursing scrubs, Elena had spent 11 years as a field medic in conflict zones across 3 continents, trained under conditions that would have made every smirking doctor in that hospital weep with fear. She had saved lives in desert heat with nothing but gauze and instinct. She had performed emergency procedures in the back of moving vehicles with artillery, fire as her background noise. But she had left that life after losing her younger brother to a medical system that failed him, because no one listened closely enough, and she had promised herself she would learn the system from the inside, starting at the very bottom if she had to. So she endured the laughter. She endured Dr. Harlan assigning her the most tedious tasks deliberately. She endured the eye rolls from younger nurses who had half her experience and twice her attitude. She did her work with precision and warmth, remembering every patient's name, noticing every small change in their condition, staying 30 minutes past every shift because a patient's chart had something that didn't quite sit right with her gut. It was on an ordinary Tuesday evening when everything changed. The emergency bay erupted with the arrival of a black sedan, and a man in an expensive suit came running through the doors, carrying a teenage girl in his arms, his face stripped completely of composure, raw terror written across every line of his distinguished face. The girl, 16, slender, her lips beginning to turn a frightening shade of blue, had collapsed at a restaurant dinner. Dr. Harlan swept in with his usual commanding authority, assessed quickly, and called out orders for a standard allergic reaction protocol. The team moved efficiently. Eleanor stood at the edge of the bay watching, and something in her chest tightened like a warning bell. The girl's fingers were not swelling the way anaphylaxis presented. Her breathing had a specific pattern, a particular irregularity Elena had seen once before, in a tent hospital in a place most of these doctors would never visit. She stepped forward. "Dr. Harlan," she said quietly, "I think this is cardiac. Arrhythmia triggered by a long QT reaction to the antibiotic she was prescribed last week. Not anaphylaxis." The room went still. Dr. Harlan turned to look at her with an expression that mixed irritation with dismissal. "Nurse Vasquez," he said, his voice carrying that particular edge of condescension he reserved for her. "Please let the physicians handle the diagnosis." Elena did not move. Her chart shows she was put on azithromycin 6 days ago, combined with the energy drink she likely had tonight. Her QT interval would be critically extended. If you administer epinephrine right now, you could send her into ventricular fibrillation. The silence that followed lasted only 4 seconds, but in those 4 seconds, a young resident named Dr. Park pulled up the girl's recent prescription history on the tablet in his hands, and the color drained from his face. He looked at Elena, he looked at Harlan. "She's right," he said. Everything shifted. The protocol changed in an instant. The team moved with new urgency in a completely different direction, the correct direction, and within 22 minutes, the girl's heart rhythm stabilized and soft color returned to her cheeks. The man in the expensive suit sat in the hallway with his head bowed and his shoulders shaking. Hours later, when the girl was stable and sleeping, the man stood in the corridor and asked who had spoken up. A nurse pointed to Elena. who was quietly updating a patient file at the far end of the hall. The man walked toward her. Elena looked up and recognized him immediately, Federal Judge Raymond Caldwell, whose name she had seen in newspapers for years. He stopped in front of her. And then, without a word of preamble, without any concern for the doctors and staff watching from every direction, Judge Raymond Caldwell lowered himself to one knee in that hospital hallway, took Elena's hand in both of his and said, "You saved my daughter's life when no one else listened. I will never forget your name." Elena felt the tears come quietly, not from pride, but from the memory of her brother, the one no one had listened to carefully enough. "Just do your job and listen," she whispered back. "That's all any of us are here to do. If this story moved something in your heart, you are exactly the kind of person our channel exists for. Please like this video, share it with someone who needs to be reminded that quiet courage matters, and subscribe to Kindness Corner Stories, because every week we bring you the stories that remind you why goodness is always worth believing in.